Welcome to Look Around the Confederation. I'm your host for the evening, Moose. And before we get started, please remember, the views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, its GEC, nor a divisions, brigade, camps, or any other subsidiaries. How is everybody doing in Dixieland tonight? I'm happy to be live here with y'all. I cannot wait. We got a pretty good show planned. And a topic that I'm very interested in. And we got, of course, I like to mess with him because he can't defend himself while he's behind the scenes. The legendary historian, Michael C. Hardy. So I'm glad for him to come on. Thank you, sir. We're going to get right into you as soon as we get over the news. Now, before we get started in the news, I'm going to kind of dive into everything real quick. I will go ahead and talk about one of our sponsors before I do that. So let me get down to them. And let's remember that tonight's news is brought to you by Southern Flags and Quilts. You don't have to send your money for a good, historically accurate flag to some Yankee. You don't have to send it overseas. You can send it right here in the South. You can give it to someone who lives in, some people will say, the heart of Dixie. I'm going to argue just a smidge and say it's Mississippi, but that's beside the point. You get to send your money to someone who loves Southern history and heritage as much as you do, who cares about every detail, who goes above and beyond anything you ask for. She does a phenomenal job, Southern Flags and Quilts. And if you don't believe me, here are just a couple of pieces of her work. I mean, look how outstanding everything is. Look at these flags. Absolutely phenomenal work on her part. And again, I know because she made the SCV chat flag. So again, we want to thank our sponsor, Southern Flags and Quilts, and ask that if you would like to get a historically accurate flag at a more reasonable price than a Yankee will give you, go check out the link in the chat below and go give her a follow on Facebook and maybe get you a flag while you're at it. All right. Now that we got our lovely sponsor out of the way, John just ordered a regimental flag from Southern Flags and Quilts. Awesome. Happy to hear it. You will love it, sir. We got Cousin Vinny in the chat. We got our Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief, Walter D. Donnie Kennedy. And so much more. Thank you guys for showing up for the show. Again, we got a good one for you guys tonight. I'm looking forward to it. Let us now get into the news. Our first bit of news, if I'm not mistaken, is in Louisiana. Those Louisiana boys are back. We have the members of the Lieutenant General Richard Taylor Camp 1308 attending a Lee Jackson banquet hosted by the Northeast and Northwest Brigades of Louisiana Division. As always, look at the members of that camp. Can you tell that those are just some of the hardest working men in the whole organization? And then you can see the Lone Ranger back there, and he's special. I'm going to see if he's even on tonight. I don't think he is, so I just insulted a past CIC, but he loves me. I'm okay. Again, great to show support. Always great to go out there and support your brigades. Going out there and supporting other brigades, other camps, other divisions. Great to see it, and thank you to the members of that camp for doing that. The next bit of news will give us into Virginia. The Lee Jackson Day in Lexington, Virginia, to be exact. The Pennsylvania Vindicators Camp, 828, and the Mechanized Cavalry, 18th Platoon was there, which also has a good bit of members from the Pennsylvania Vindicators Camp. And the newly formed Ring Gold Battery was there as well. And they provided, of course, demonstrations together at events and at cemeteries with cannon demonstrations, my apologies, together at events and ceremonies. I'll get it out sooner or later. I want to thank you guys for, of course, going to celebrate the lovely Lee Jackson Day in Lexington, Virginia. I always hear good things about it, never a bad one. So thank y'all for going out there, showing your Confederate pride and respecting these two great men in General Lee and General Jackson. So thank you. Thank you. And of course, that is given to us by the legendary Mr. Ricky. Mr. Ricky always comes through when it is a slow news day here at SCV Chat, which we actually didn't have a slow news day for once. Thank y'all for sending in all the news. Keep it up. The next bit of news is a event. Let me pull up the poster here. This one's going to be a good one, everybody. The Yadkin Grays Eagles Camp 1765's Lee Jackson Banquet will be February 18th, 2023. And you will start to gather there at 5:30. Dinner will be at 6 p.m. And program will start at 6:30. It is at the Moose Lodge. Oh, I wish I would have saw that earlier. That got me. Again, if you are in this area in North Carolina, please go out and support this event. Lee Jackson banquets are always awesome. You're never going to be disappointed. I was just at one at Beauvoir. Absolutely loved it. Wish I could go to every one I could. Sadly, I don't have the budget. If you can't see the details on this poster, remember, all events that are sent in to Look Around the Confederation will be posted on the SCV Chat Facebook page as soon as we go live off the air. And so you can get information. You can see the poster a bit more clearer, and we will post it every week up until your event. So again, thank you. I hope you guys have a great Lee Jackson banquet. Make sure to send me pictures, and I cannot wait to see how it did. Now, our next bit of news takes us to Vicksburg. Let's see here. Where is there? It is. Camp Commander Ronald H. Eds of SCV Camp 914 ran across some Boy Scout troops from Tyler, Texas. They spent about an hour discussing tactics, weapons, clothing, foods, and camp life of the average soldier during the war. That is awesome. Always good to see youth involvement. Always good to see us teaching youth. And look at those kids. They seem like they are just all in, and that is just a beautiful sight, in my opinion. Love seeing younger people pick up that added history there. And so thank you, Commander Edge, for doing that. And I hope those Boy Scouts had a good history lesson, which I know they did. So again, thank you, sir. Let's see, we got a couple things in the chat. The Kennedy twins had a great time in Texas this past week. This is from our Chief of Heritage Operations, Mr. Ron Kennedy. Zach said he will be visiting HQ in Columbia, Tennessee, all the way from California on March 17th, and he would love to meet some compatriots there. So if you can be at the SCV headquarters on March 17th, please go meet Zach. Zach's a great guy. He's from California. He is right in enemy territory, defending the cause and leading the charge. So thank you, sir. Salute to the dedication, everybody. Hello from Southern Flags and Quilts. Southern Flags and Quilts in the chat. Again, remember to go support our sponsor. The link is in the chat. We have to have a reunion in California one year. I love the California boys. We would love to go over there. I would hate to say it, though. I don't know if how many Southerners are going to be willing to step foot in California, but maybe the northern part of California. That's a bit more southern than the northern. I mean, the southern part. It's kind of opposite over in California. Let's see here. And the next bit of news, we're going back to Louisiana for the Lieutenant General Richard Taylor Camp 1308 attended the Lee Jackson banquet held by the UDC Shreveport Chapter 237. They were presented a certificate of appreciation for their work and for their hard work and dedication for the rededication of the Caddo Confederate Monument. I know I mispronounced that. I'm going to go ahead and apologize to all my Louisiana friends that are in the chat. You are more than welcome to call me after the show and give me grief. I know past Commander-in-Chief Chuck McMichael will, and more than likely the legend Paul Gramling will. But again, thank you guys for all y'all's hard work on getting that monument back up, and to the ladies of the UDC chapter. Oh, I'm struggling tonight, aren't I? Which is nothing new. The monument is beautiful, outstanding. I was there at the rededication service, and if you have a chance, I would recommend to go see it if you were in the area. Lovely, beautiful monument, absolutely beautiful. I want to thank those two for all the hard work they put into that. I could not, I could not imagine the process of putting up a monument. Um, Zach says most of us are trying to escape from California. Cousin Vinny says he feels that as he is in New Jersey. Uh, our lieutenant commander in chief says there's a lot of support for the South out there, more support out there for the South in the West than you think. Hey, how about that? That's good. The UCV had a reunion in Denver back in the day. They said it was it was south of the extended Mason-Dixon line. I love that. Yes, the ladies are the best. They put in a lot of hard work with us and make everything amazing. Now for our last bit of news, and then we're going to take a quick pop tart break. We got a lovely guest to come on, and he's going to talk, and he's going to do a lot better job of doing it than I am, and he's going to go on for a good bit. You have no time limit, Mr. Hardy. I just want to let you know that. And then towards the end, I will talk about the General A.P. Hill reinterment. And we got a special letter for that. I'm not going to spoil anything. We're going to talk about it when it gets time. But let's go ahead and go into the last bit of news. This one comes from a legend up in Tennessee. He knows who he is. On January 1st, the Long Street Camp 847 SCV held the 30th anniversary Lee Jackson Day dinner in Knoxville, Tennessee. The musical guest was the unreconstructed string band. Attendance exceeded last year's, and they had a great event. I want to congratulate y'all on that event. Thank you up there for you Knoxville boys. Y'all have always done a good job, and I'm so happy to be getting news from y'all, and great to see the attendance. It is reported, I'm getting a report, that 180 to 190 people were in attendance. That is just phenomenal. I want to send my congrats to you, Camp 87. And thank you guys for that, leading the charge, making sure we honor those two great men. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so happy to see that y'all just had a fantastic event. Without further ado, though, that is the end of our news cycle for today. Before we get in it, we're going to go ahead and hit our last ad for the day. Let me get to them. If you were watching the Monday show, I famously deleted my whole notes on this section right before the ad was ready to go. So hopefully I'll do better tonight and will not delete my notes before that happens. But our next and last sponsor for the evening is the Kennedy Twins' new book, Jefferson Davis, High Road to Emancipation and Constitutional Government. Link, of course, is in the chat to go support them at www.kennedytwins.com. And, of course, this book is about Jefferson Davis being a leader of the high road to emancipation. He looked for the day in which slaves would be prepared to live and participate in society. He did more than advocate for the high road to emancipation. He practiced his beliefs in the ultimate emancipation of Southern slaves. Many of his former slaves left for prosperity, and their testimony about their former master who prepared them for freedom and to be a self-sustaining member of society. This is one that I'm definitely interested in, and I cannot wait to read and do a book review on the show. This is one of those books that you don't really think about how much we needed it until after it happened. And again, there's some things in here I've already figured out that I had no idea about President Davis. and it makes you think a whole lot more. It's that thinking, getting our enemies and getting ourselves to think, that is just absolutely amazing. So we want to thank the Kennedy twins for being the sponsor of tonight's news. And remember, you can get their new book, Jefferson Davis, High Road to Emancipation and Constitutional Government, at www.kennedytwins.com or online bookstores. And without further ado, we want to thank them one last time, and we will hit a quick Pop-Tart break. And when we get back, we will have Michael C. Hardy on. Thank you.
There is a place nestled in the rolling farmland of southern Middle Tennessee. A home constructed in 1837, nearly lost to the ravages of war. Saved by a servant and a Confederate general. A place where families loved and lost. If walls could talk, what stories could be told? If a place, a home, can feel love, loss, pain, surely this is one of those places. Nearby is a more recent structure, and inside are the stories of heroes and heroines, stories of battles won and lost, stories of sacrifices made by the people of its native soil. A place that will tell the true and complete story of the Southland and the war fought for its freedom. From the causes that led to the conflict to the modern-day struggles to protect Southern history. Historic Elm Springs and the Confederate Museum at Elm Springs are the general headquarters for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. A place where the story of the Southland and its historic struggle is preserved and told. Come and discover your history.
Always love that commercial, and that commercial will be going a bit more into the national spotlight soon, but that's a story for another time. I want to welcome our special guest for the evening, Michael C. Hardy, world-renowned historian, Michael C. Hardy. I want to thank you for coming on, sir. And without further ado, I'm just going to let you get into what you do best.
It's Yadkin Grays.
I knew I was going to butcher that as soon as I saw it. And I got a text, and it's just like, it didn't even tell me I did it wrong. It was just like a that face palming emoji. I got that from one of my friends. And he was like,
Yadkin Grays and Yadkin. They're actually a really great camp. Their camp commander, Charles Matthews, does a flag program where he brings out, I don't know, 30 or 40 flags, correct flags from the Army of Northern Virginia, the Army of Tennessee, Trans-Mississippi flags. And he just phenomenal job. And it's a really great camp over there. Lots of great folks in the Yadkinville camp. Great folks. But that's okay. There's probably a lot of things in Mississippi and Louisiana I couldn't pronounce. So
I tell people, please send in all your news. And I usually end it with, I apologize if I butcher anything.
That's right.
I'm one of those people, I have trouble with pronunciating certain words.
I understand. My tongue gets tied as well at certain points. So we are going to talk a little bit about A.P. Hill this evening.
Yes,
Ambrose Powell Hill. And like Jackson and like Forrest, Ambrose Powell Hill is one of those figures that seems to emerge larger than life to those of us who study Confederate history. A lot of folks called him Powell Hill or Little Powell Hill, as opposed to Daniel Harvey Hill, another one of the Hill family, even though they weren't closely related. A.P. Hill was born near Culpeper, Virginia, November 9th of 1825. and graduated from the United States Military Academy in 1847. And took him an extra year to graduate, but some of his classmates include Ambrose Burnside and Henry Heth and Thomas J. Jackson, George B. McClellan, George Pickett, George Stoneman, and Cadmus C. Wilcox. And I included in that list a couple of Federals because A.P. Hill would fight against Ambrose Burnside and George B. McClellan. And I think, it would have been easy just to go through and list the Confederates, but those people are a part of history as well. Hill did not serve in the war with Mexico per se. He arrived late in Mexico, too late to see action, but he was a part of the garrison troop there in Mexico. He did service in Texas. He did service in Florida prior to the war, down fighting the Seminoles. In 1859, Hill married Kitty Morgan McClung, who was the widowed sister of John Hunt Morgan. And so there's a good east-west tie-in there to A.P. Hill's story. They would eventually have 4 daughters. And that last daughter that A.P. Hill had, he never met. He was killed before she was born. Hill resigned from the U.S. Army about 6 weeks prior to Fort Sumter, and then when Virginia left the Union, he was commissioned a colonel in the 13th Virginia Infantry. Didn't take long for him to be promoted to brigadier general in February of 1862, and his first battle really came at Williamsburg, Virginia in May of 1862. That battle, the outcome is kind of inconclusive. It was a rearguard action. Joseph E. Johnston was pulling back toward the defenses of Richmond, and some of McClellan's troops were trying to catch Joe Johnston's army. And Hill's men were a part of a group, one of the brigades that went down and fought a delaying action. But a lot of people saw what Hill did and said, oh my gosh, he can fight, which is not true with all of the generals that we have. And because of that, Hill is actually promoted to Major General on May 26, 1862, and given command of a division, which he called the Light Division. And I know in the past I've been on and talked about the Branch Lane Brigade and Stonewall Jackson. The first letter that A.P. Hill ever wrote, where he signed himself commanding the Light Division, was a letter to Lawrence O'Brien Branch announcing that Hill was assuming command, and Branch's North Carolina Brigade was a part of the Light Division. And there were eventually, in the beginning, 6 brigades of troops from various states in the Light Division. Hill fought during the 7 days. He was recognized as probably Robert E. Lee's most aggressive general. We could probably throw that up between D.H. Hill and A.P. Hill, but one of Lee's most aggressive generals. But following 7 days, there's a disagreement between Hill and Longstreet, James Longstreet. And at one point, they actually challenge each other to a duel. Hill challenge, or there's a duel. And Robert E. Lee had to step in, and the Light Division and A.P. Hill are transferred to Stonewall Jackson's command. And Hill would play a distinctive role in both the battles of Cedar Mountain and Second Manassas and Chantilly there on September 1st of 1862. But like most folks that serve with Jackson, Jackson and Hill had a falling out as well. And at one point, Jackson actually orders Hill's arrest. And so Hill is under arrest by Jackson. And it really, if you study the history, it's really Jackson's fault. Jackson had sent out orders about a certain way that his corps was supposed to move out, his divisions were supposed to move out, and then in the middle of the night changed that and did not send word to Hill. And so Hill's standing there trying to figure out, hey, what's going on? And Jackson rides up and he's mad at Hill for not moving, but Hill never got the order. And so Hill basically just gave Jackson his sword at that point in time. And Jackson placed Hill under arrest. So it's at that point in time that the Maryland campaign starts. And Hill is in arrest at the rear of the division when they start heading to Maryland, and some folks come forward and eventually say, "Hey, you're going into Maryland without your best division commander," and Jackson would put Hill back in command of the light division. Um, so there are probably one of the things that we know Jackson about is that Maryland campaign. After Harper's Ferry is surrounded and surrenders, Jackson leaves Hill to parole all of the prisoners, to take care of all the captured guns and cannons and food. And then Lee would send a note to Jackson, or through Jackson to Hill, and say, "Hey, we need Hill's division at Sharpsburg." So on September 17th, 1862, Hill makes that march from Harper's Ferry, 17 miles, in dreadful heat to Sharpsburg, and comes in on the Confederate right and basically saves the day. Common statement, and there's even a book by this title called Up Came Hill. And Hill is coming up from Harper's Ferry and plows into the Federals that have crossed Burnside's Bridge there on the Confederate right as the Confederate right is retreating, and just basically saved the army, because everybody else that Lee had at Sharpsburg had pretty much been fought out. And Hill, I won't say Hill was fresh because he lost a lot of men on that march, but he's fresher than they've not been engaged in combat throughout the day. Hill is also in division command at Fredericksburg. Strangely enough, it's on Hill's front that the Federals actually break through the Confederate lines for a brief amount of time, and they are eventually pushed back. At Chancellorsville, Powell Hill was wounded by artillery fragments just a moment after Stonewall Jackson was mortally wounded by troops from Hill's command. And of course, we've talked about that. It was the 18th North Carolina, now of Lane's brigade, that fired that volley into the woods that night. Not their fault, but that's the way that history happened. Following the death of Jackson, Lee reorganized the Army of Northern Virginia. Hill was promoted to lieutenant general and given command of the new Third Corps. The light division was reduced from 6 to 4 brigades, but they are a part of that new Third Corps as well. And of course, Hill's record as a Corps commander has its ups and downs. That attack at Bristow Station in October of 1863 was probably the lowest point of A.P. Hill's career. Hill did not send out proper reconnaissance and skirmishers. He just ordered brigades forward, and the Federals were waiting pretty much in ambush and chewed up a couple of his brigades. And Lee really chastised him. One of those few instances where Lee comes out and says, "Well, that was a bad idea," is with A.P. Hill there at Bristow Station. Hill is out sick due to kidney disease during part of the Overland campaign, but he returns during the Siege of Petersburg and became, as one historian called him, Lee's most dependable general. One high-ranking general noted that every Federal effort to break Lee's right during the Petersburg campaign was met and defeated by General Hill with promptness and without heavy loss on Hill's part. This list of victories include the Jerusalem Plank Road, Weldon Railroad, the Crater, Reams Station, People's Farm, and Burgess Mill. We know, of course, that Hill was desperately trying to reach his shattered lines below Petersburg on April 2nd of 1865 when he was killed by Federal soldiers. The breakthrough happened on part of Hill's front. I'm not going to lay blame, but Robert E. Lee had pulled so many men out of those lines to send to Five Forks that some of his soldiers in that section wrote that the Confederate soldiers, were about 10 feet apart. So when the Federal 6th Corps massed and charged early on the morning of April 2nd, there's not really much the Confederates could have done because they just didn't have the manpower. And Hill hears about this, and he's riding toward the front and he is shot and killed by a federal soldier very early that morning. One of Lee's staff officers wrote many years after the war, quote, "The noble name of A.P. Hill stands recorded high on the list of those noble sons of Virginia at whose roll call grateful memory will ever answer." And I know there are a lot of Virginians who still believe that. We need to help other Virginians grab hold of parts of that history and help realize how important these folks like A.P. Hill were in our history. Hill is probably one of the most moved around after he died individuals. He was originally buried Coalfield in Chesterfield County, Chesterfield County. And then in 1867, he was removed to Hollywood Cemetery there in Richmond. And then in 1891, he was moved again to the intersection where he was for many, many years, decades, until just a few weeks ago when they disinterred him and took him to back to Culpeper, Virginia. A.P. Hill is not, even though he occupies such a prominent position in Confederate history and wartime history and Southern history, he's not very well written about. There are scores of books on Lee. I own over 60. There are, I don't know how many books on Jackson because I've never counted, but I have a dozen books on Jackson. There are really only 3 books on A.P. Hill. And I'm talk about those very briefly. One of them is A.P. Hill, Lee's Forgotten General by William Woods Hassler that came out in the 50s. And then there is James I. Robertson's biography on Hill that came out in the 80s. It's called General A.P. Hill, Story of a Confederate Warrior. And you can still find both of these on the secondary market. And then in the 1950s, Martin Schneck wrote Up Came Hill, The Story of the Light Division. You can still find that book as well. Bud Robertson's book on A.P. Hill is probably one of my favorite biographies. He also did a superb book on Stonewall Jackson. In fact, both of those are my go-to books on those two folks. Just a little bit about A.P. Hill.
Well, thank you for telling us a little about him. I will kind of agree with that title there, Lee's Forgotten General. As you said, there are hundreds of books written on Lee, Jackson, Forrest, and, kind of a funny joke between me and our current commander-in-chief of how many books there are on Gettysburg. And people have to remember, and I'm going to pull up David's comment again. We must be the writers of our own history. We must preserve our history. And there should be a lot more out there on Hill. And there should be a lot more out there on communities during the war. Like, for example, my community, the Wayne County Rifles. There's not really a book on them, bless their heart. But we need to protect our own history and make sure it is remembered, people. And everybody, we have our Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief asking, what book would you recommend on Hill for new readers?
I would go with Bud Robertson's, James I. Robertson's biography, General A.P. Hill, The Story of a Confederate Warrior. That is the go-to book on A.P. Hill. It's a great read. It's not a hard read. And you will get a good perspective on Hill's entire life, from his service in the U.S. Army into the Mexican War, chasing the Seminoles, all the way through all the important things he did during the 1860s. That is one of my favorite books, and I have a lot of books, but that is one of my favorite books on A.P. Hill. But you're right. There are so many books on Gettysburg. It is absolutely unreal. There's somewhere around 70,000 books on the war total. And we know 15,000 books just on Lincoln. But the amount of books on Gettysburg is just phenomenal.
It's a special one. I think I'm a Mississippian, so of course people are going to say I'm a bit biased, but I think Vicksburg is a bit more of an important battle. The only thing Gettysburg really did was show that Robert E. Lee could be beaten.
Well, see, I have a different take.
Okay.
On Gettysburg. Gettysburg allowed the Confederate Army to survive another year because of the pure amount of foodstuffs. I mean, just miles and miles of cattle and sheep and fodder, and just the wagon trains were unreal. Gettysburg, I mean, the Confederate Army in the East would have been hard pressed to have lasted as long as they did without all the food that they captured.
I know our commander in chief will agree with you on that. There's a little inside joke that me and him had a discussion on Gettysburg, and this is before he was commander in chief, so I'll plead the fifth. And me and GCB kind of got him wound up on Gettysburg, but that's a story for another day. We will do a more in-depth episode on General Hill in the future. I just wanted people to know who we were talking about here and why. Well, everybody is important to remember, but I wanted to show the significance of this man. And again, an honorable man that should not have been dug up so many times and disrespected. I'm glad he has found a final resting place. I'm happy that his descendant is pleased with it, and I'm happy they had a great event. Without further ado, we are going to take just a small commercial break. I'm going to let Mr. Hardy go. I kind of hoodwinked him into this. But everybody, if you could thank Mr. Hardy for coming on and giving this great talk on General Hill. I know I will, because, again, I didn't know a lot about General Hill before this, and I'm a bit ashamed to say. But, yeah, no, everybody, could you please thank Mr. Hardy for coming on? We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about the reinterment of General Hill. So thank you guys, and we will be right back. Let's see here if I can find a good one. Let's see here.
When my mother was in college, she danced with Confederate veterans. To me, it wasn't that far away. You know, my father knew this. My mother knew this. Almost 50 years ago, I joined the Sons of Confederate Veterans. In those days, we weren't concerned about saving monuments or any of those things. That wasn't necessary. In fact, none of us had any remote idea that it would ever come up. We can't just sit there and react. We have to be proactive. Or, as Robert E. Lee said, the best way to disrupt your enemy's plans is to strike first. Everyone should do all in his power to collect and disseminate the truth, in the hope that it may find a place in history and descend to posterity. History is not the relation of campaigns and battles and generals or other individuals, but that which shows the principles for which the South contended and which justified her struggle for those principles. If you're looking for some place to be where you think you're going to accomplish something to save our history, go to the Sons of Confederate Veterans. I'm Thomas Lee Jesse. I'm a descendant of Private Daughtery Gilmer, a Confederate veteran.
Always love that face video. And again, thank you to the legendary historian Michael C. Hardy for coming on. Michael is basically the SCV Chats historian at this point. We call him anytime we have a question and kind of almost trick him to be on any show that we need a historical thinker. So everybody, please thank him for coming on. It was very nice of him to do tonight. And without further ado, we're going to talk about the reinterment. I will ask everybody to be patient. I'm the only one producing tonight. So it's going to take a couple minutes jumping back and forth for a second. But first, I want to thank the descendant of General Hill for giving me this information. Sadly, he could not be on this evening due to personal issues. I won't get into that. That's his business. And I ask that no one else try to. But I want to thank him again for providing this information. Mr. John Hill, again, sir, thank you. And I'm glad that a descendant was involved with General Hill's reinterment. So thank you, sir. He's given me a lovely letter to read to y'all on his retales of the events, as well as a couple of messages as I talked to him this morning or this afternoon. And a couple things he wants to let y'all know, and just about the event and about all that's gone on in general. So allow me to get into it. Again, we're going to jump back and forth for a bit, but I want to make sure we get the full effect, and this gets the full dedication that it deserves. So again, this is a letter from John Hill, the descendant of General A.P. Hill. He said he exhumed General Hill's remains on December 13th in Richmond. And again, you can see the couple pictures he has been nice enough to provide for us as well, this whole process. I put his remains in a beautiful oak casket and draped the casket with an unreconstructed Virginia flag. And you can see this here. Of course, taking great respect, unlike our enemies, with making sure that General Hill was respected in this. I want to thank him again for this. There he is again, getting General Hill out. We're going to go back to that picture. We brought him to the Bennett Funeral Home, where he was until January 21st. And again, we got a picture of that right here. Again, being very respectful. That is a beautiful casket. I'm sure General Hill would have approved. Anthony, Derek, and Bubba of the 4th platoon in the mechanized cavalry were the only ones to show up to support him the day that he got the remains. So he wanted to make sure that they were the ones to escort the general's remains from the funeral home to the cemetery for the reinterment, and asked me, of course, specifically to make note of this. Let's see here. I believe this is them. Again, I wanted to show a picture, and again, thank them for what they did for General Hill. They also had some other mechanized cavalry members help them escort the body. They did an amazing job and got the general safely to the cemetery. Some pictures from the event. As you can tell, the event was well attended. Approximately 1,000 people showed up for the reinterment in Fairview Cemetery. It was a beautiful ceremony for the general. Many people again showed up. We're going to jump to this picture while we talk. He had full military honors, which he never had for any of his previous burials. It brought me to tears. I was presented with the casket flag during the ceremony, and I wanted to present it to a Mr. Patrick, and I wanted it to be a surprise for him. He had no idea. So I turned to Mr. Patrick, gave him a salute, and presented him with the casket flag, which was also of course, the unreconstructed Virginia flag. He said it was a very emotional experience and no one deserves that flag more than him. He had been honoring my ancestor for the past 30 years. I believe that is this picture. After the ceremony, I got to meet a lot of people and take pictures with them. I could not believe all the support and the gifts that I received in honor of the general. I also had Anthony, Derek, and Bubba drape a third national flag on the general's casket. That is the flag that I chose for the casket to be buried with, and I wanted them to drape it with me since they showed up to support me back in December. General Hill is finally home and at rest, and Mr. John Hill wanted to thank everybody who attended and who helped in the reinterment. And of course, here are just a couple of other pictures. And he wanted to give a special thank you to one of the pallbearers, his good friend, Casey Weber. Thank you, Casey, for being a pallbearer for General Hill. And thank you for everybody who supported Mr. John Hill in this endeavor and making sure that General Hill was returned respectively and honorably. Much like the General Forrest reinterment, I'll say it again. For those who were there, that is a once-in-a-lifetime event. And you will always be able to say you were there to make sure a Confederate general was respected and honored, just like the United Confederate Veterans would have wanted us to do as the Sons. This is one of the greatest examples of living out the charge I've ever seen. Respecting a general, respecting any Confederate soldier and putting them to rest respectably, honorably, in a way they deserve more than anything, and making sure that they will no longer be mistreated wherever they are is very honorable. And again, it's one of the greatest ways I could say people have led the charge. I want to thank Mr. John Hill for taking on this responsibility. I know he is a descendant, and he wanted again to thank everybody for honoring and respecting him. Forgive me. I would ask that everybody share this episode of Look Around, not for us, but for General Hill. Let's get word out about his reinterment. Let's get word out that it was done honorably, respectively, and the way the general would have wanted. Let's do this for the general, not for us. And we will plan for a special General A.P. Hill SCV Chat Monday episode dedicated to the man, of learning more about him and giving more information out about him. I also wanted to thank the Maryland Division SCV Color Guard, led by Captain Ray Hooks, who were present at the General A.P. Hill reinterment. They did a great job. They had a great turnout themselves. I will say I'm sorry I did not notice that they had the wrong number of attendants. That's my fault. Thank you for sending this in, gentlemen. I'm glad that y'all were there to honor the colors and honor the general and help out with this event. We do have a member of the Maryland Division Color Guards in the chat. And of course, Jason was there in attendance, and Mr. Casey Weber was there as a pallbearer for the general. I want to thank y'all for attending. I want to thank y'all for being respectful and doing y'all's duty as a son of Confederate veterans member, but not only just as a member, but as a Southerner, as a decent human being. I want to thank y'all. Again, beautiful event. It looks like they had just a magnificent turnout, over 1,000 people. Mr. John Hill did want me to say one thing, that if y'all could be praying for him and if y'all could help in this battle that they are perceiving, that he went to court in Richmond on September 29th and proved that he had lineage to General Hill. They lost the case to get possession of his monument and grave marker. But he wants everybody to know that they have filed an appeal, and they are still in the battle with the city of Richmond for his monument and grave marker. So if you can help Mr. Hill get that back for his ancestor and to put it up again honorably for him, we ask that you please try to do so. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but this is just, again, one of the greatest examples of leading the charge. And if you don't get emotional at this, if you don't get goosebumps from this, if you don't feel something from this, I don't know what to say to you. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I would like to tell everybody to make sure that if you have any camp or division news, or you would like to talk about a project live, you can email us at scvyouthoutreach@gmail.com, and you can send your news, your pictures, your short videos, and write-ups to scvyouthoutreach@gmail.com, and you'll be featured on the upcoming episode of Look Around the Confederation. Make sure, again, to share this episode out, not for Look Around, not for me, but for General Hill, so people can get an update on his reinterment. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I'm looking through my notes, making sure I don't have anything else I need to say before we go off the air. I do not believe so. It is sad that this had to happen, but at least it has happened with the descendant of General Hill leading the charge and making sure that he has been put down with respect, military honors, again, which had never been done before. I did not know that until reading Mr. Hill's letter earlier, and making sure that the general was well taken care of in a place safe and where he will stay, hopefully, for the rest of the time that the good Lord lets us walk on this earth. No, don't thank me. Thank Mr. Hill. Thank the people that did this reinterment. Thank everybody that went into respecting this and leading the charge in the most important and biggest way I think I can come up with. Thank them. And I'm going to just leave with this picture. We're not going to do a normal funny exit. I felt like the reinterment report deserved to end a bit differently than others. So I'm just going to end with a picture of John Hill giving respects to his ancestor, General AP.